crack at this.
Thank you.
Caroline Pidcock, it's a delight to have you with us today. Thank you for agreeing to speak with our fourth year students, landscape architecture students at UNSW.
Thanks, Patrick, for the invitation.
You're welcome. I thought you'd be a very nice start to sort of set a tone for the final 12 weeks of students' four-year degree. I've heard some of what you're going to speak about today before, and it's why I asked you, just to give you a slightly more professional introduction. I'm just going to read for everyone a little bit about Caroline. I'm reading off an article of hers. Caroline's a Sydney architect and prominent advocate for sustainable development. In addition to her own practice, Caroline's an ambassador for the Al Gore Climate Change and 1 Million Women initiatives, a member of the Beyond Zero Emissions Advisory Committee and member of the AIA Climate Action and Sustainability Task Group, and chair of the AIA Environment Design Guide Advisory Group. As well as that, in 2021, Caroline was jointly awarded the National AIA 2021 Leadership in Sustainability Award, and in 2019, the AIA New South Wales President's Award. Caroline, I feel completely honoured to have you speaking with us. So I will let you carry on, and yeah, welcome. And if we could have a bit of a question time at the end, it would be great.
Sure, and thank you so much. I mean, I'm feel so indulged that you're interested in my musings about what sustainability is, because it is a journey. And gosh, anyway, so let me share, and I'll start a bit of a talk. Okay, great, and here we go. So firstly, as soon as this screen comes on, oh, hang on, stop share. That's
We'll get there.
I think I just added some slides at the end. You know how you asked for some.
Oh, that's nice.
You're going to have to edit this because anyway,
I can edit it.
You can edit.
And everyone, as an aside, I'll talk about this more broadly with students, but I noticed in something from UNSW, a terribly formal document in the course outline, there is a piece on plagiarism. And the piece that really grabbed my eye was one of the definitions of academic integrity, amongst a few things, is courage. And I thought that is a great thing to have emphasis on for this entire term.
Oh, hang on, where is this? There we go. Okay. Yes, courage, important. So thank you, Patrick. And firstly, I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we all meet. And acknowledge that throughout Australia, their continuing connection to culture, community, land, sea and sky. And I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I was actually born in Grafton, which is, I'm going to murder this, Jadalmany, which means brushbox tree, on the Clarence River in northern New South Wales, on the land of the Bundjalung Nation. I was raised in Mossman, which is Taliagni, in the land of the Kringai of the Eora Nation, and now live in Millers Point, which is Kudja, in the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I have been so impacted, I think, by their mighty river systems, which is where I seek daily regeneration, because they mean so much to me. And it's only in probably the past 5 years that I've actually really learned how important our landscapes are, the places we are, and how they shape us. And I think it's really important that we understand the names of these places and what they mean, because the Indigenous names actually really mean something about the places. So I think this is a beautiful quote, that we are all visitors to this time, this place. We're just passing through. Our purpose here is to observe, to learn, to grow, to love, and then we return home. And the ache for home lives in all of us, the safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned. And I think that home is a very interesting definition, because I don't think it's just the four walls within which we live, it's the places that we live in. I think through COVID, this is a quote from a friend of mine, Talina Edwards, there's been many learnings, but I think that some of the really important ones was just about how much we need to be connected to nature and how important that is. And it's those things that are so much more than the consumerist stuff, which doesn't bring happiness or self-worth. And I think that the whole idea of slowing down our hectic lives and just being more in place and listening deeply with our bodies is really an important thing. And I think that that is one of the best things to come out of this whole time. It was really interesting that there was, for many, many years, it was agreed that people's instinct to a terror, a threat or a terror, is to fight or flight. And then when this was revealed in a book I read, Cassandra Speaks by Elizabeth Lesser, When Women Are the Storytellers, this human story changes. It was found in the 1990s that whole approach was developed after only interviewing men, and that when they started to interview women, they found that their approach to a terrible situation was to tend and befriend, because often they were caring for older people or small or young people or people less able to fight or flight. And I think that tend and befriend is a much better approach, much more resilient and long-term approach to dealing with a whole lot of things. And I think it brings in the idea that we possibly in these days need to think more like a mother, because a mother knows the importance of the household, but that the economy isn't the whole thing. It's actually a whole lot more about what we need. And I think that it's time for rematriation, which is a returning to the sacred of the mother, which doesn't mean it's only for women. It just means I think the pendulum needs to swing back from a very masculine way of being in the world, which is clearly not working at the moment, into a much more feminine way of being in the world, which is a much more caring, tending and befriending way. I've also been quite inspired by the 2021 Pritzker Prize winners, Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal, who have this fabulous quote: never demolish, never remove or replace, always add, transform and reuse. I think the days of just ripping down things carelessly and building anew should be over. So in my thinking about how we as architects, particularly in the Architects Declare movement, should be approaching our work at the moment, I've come up with this idea that we should be, and with all of those other things I've just spoken about, that we should tend, mend, renew, and regenerate. So what does that mean? Well, tend is to apply one's attention to take care of, minister to, watch over, look after. It's about actually deeply understanding the places and the systems that we are in, deeply listening with our whole body and really looking to understand what we do before we do anything. And I think that we've got to kind of learn to do that much more deeply than we have been in the past. Mend is about repairing, something broken or worn, restoring to good condition. And it's a profound act of restoring integrity to an object and our relationship with it. There's a beautiful Japanese art of kintsugi, which is about sort of not, if a bowl breaks, you don't throw it away, you mend it, and you mend it with gold. So you celebrate that mending, you celebrate that imperfection in the new. And I think that as we approach our buildings and landscapes and cities, this idea of mending is really something really important to start with. Renew is about making effective for an additional period, to make new, or as if new again, revive and re-establish. So after we've mended, then there's renewal that might happen, and often brings in sort of new technologies that are needed to sort of take us into the next stages, like renewable technologies and all sorts of improvements to windows and other things. But I think that we can do this in quite beautiful ways. And then finally, regenerate. And I think I'll talk a bit more about regeneration at the end, but regeneration is beyond sustainability. It's about really deeply understanding the systems within which we work and realizing the potential of the energies within those systems. And it's about sort of making better, so that if every act of development is better rather than just, you know, sustaining things is not enough. Like if you said you had a sustainable relationship with your loved one, you probably wouldn't get very excited about that. But a regenerative relationship with your loved one is a much better one. But so too is how we work and what we need to be thinking about. So this is on the left is a regenerative design framework developed by Daniel Christian Wall, based on some work by Regenesis. And it kind of shows how regeneration fits in with, below that middle line, at the very bottom, we've got conventional practice. And then green is relative improvements. Sustainable is a neutral point. Restorative is humans restoring nature. Reconciliatory is reintegrating humans as parts of nature. And then regenerative is an appropriate understanding of how we are part of nature. And you can see that energy spiral, that as we work, as we find that there is a much more energized system that can help take us forward. And I put this alongside the Designing with Country idea, which is from our Indigenous custodians of Australia. And this is a diagram Dylan Combermary and the people at the Government Architect's Office in New South Wales have developed. And I think that really what regenerative design is about actually understanding, or starting to understand, what designing with country is. I mean, I think we are so lucky to have the Indigenous people of Australia here with their immense knowledge that we can and need to sort of start to understand, because we are not separate to nature, we are part of nature. And the minute we start working with that idea and understanding the opportunity of realizing that, we will start to develop much better ideas. So this is another thing that I think is really interesting, this 3 horizons thinking, because sometimes you sort of feel like we can't make the big changes that are happening because we're busy in this world. It's like, how do you fix a plane when you're actually flying on it? And this 3 horizons thinking shows that you can do that if you just sort of maintain business as usual for the moment, knowing that in the future it will go out of favor, it will disappear. But also at the same time, picturing what the real emerging future that we need is, and keeping that in mind and knowing it will rise at some time in the future. And meanwhile, there's usually a disruptive innovation that will help move us from the first horizon to the third, because it will helpfully disrupt our ways of being enough to allow us to let the third one come in. So I think Kate Rayworth has done a whole lot of stuff on this. She wrote Donut Economics. And I just think that being able to keep a whole bunch of things in mind at the one time is a really helpful way of knowing that good big change can come, and it will come in a timely way. So what do we do? How do we do it? I love Arthur Ashe's quote, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. So don't get phased, just sort of keep thinking, I'm starting where I am, I've got stuff, and I'm going to do what I can. So I'm sort of looking at these different ways. I'm sort of doing some talks for 1 Million Women on your home. And these are sort of 10 ideas that are emerging from a whole bunch of stuff that I'm doing. So I thought I'd talk to you about those because they're relevant for whatever you're doing, whether it's landscaping or buildings or whatever. So the first one is about essence. It's understanding who you are, what makes you you, what makes a project the place it is, and the whole system. And it should be informed and enriched by that, because every single place and every single system is unique and needs to be, I suppose, understood and then explored and allowed to be its own beauty. I mean, I think that when you look at this, you know, there's perfection and imperfection, and all of that is your essence, and that is absolutely fine and wonderful to explore. The next one is connect with country, you know, and this goes back to what I was saying just before. We are part of nature, not separate. If we learn how to care for country, country will care for us. I think that it sounds very simple to say, it's very important to do, because when you start to think that we are part of nature, then whatever you do to any landscape or any place, you are doing to yourself. And we need to really think that through. Local living, gosh, that's important. And what is local living? We need diverse local communities, not just all rich people, not just all poor people, not just all white people, not just all from one culture. We need to have really diverse communities, which will then be, which is what happens in nature. There's a great diversity and that helps make ecosystems really resilient. And so we need to work out how our design can help connect with, develop and support these diverse local communities. Water is so key, and every site you work on is part of a watershed. So you can't just think about the 4 boundaries of your site, or the whatever, how many boundaries, but we need to understand how this fits into that larger watershed and is a contributor to its overall functioning. And remember that water is a precious flowing resource. 5th one is energy. And there are so many renewable energy systems that surround us all the time. And it's not just the sun, it's not just the wind, it's the people's energy that we are surrounded by. It's food energy. Food is just basically energy stored in a form that we can and need to better use. And I think that we need to, when we tend to a site, we need to really kind of look for and understand those energy systems and then work with them. Health and well-being. If we're not doing work that creates health and well-being, what are we doing? Because our work really impacts on this, and we can use our work to design it to be really positive and healthy, both mentally and physically. And every part of this needs to take that into account. So this is resources, which are really materials, but I think the word resources brings a greater depth of understanding to the fact that they are important resources. They have many attributes, and we need to be resourceful and holistic in their use, and we need to care for them because they are a resource. They're not something to be thrown away ever. And we need to work out how to work with them, the right ones in the right place, in the right way. Economy is kind of important, but I think we need to engage. There's a fantastic site and book called The Art of Frugal Hedonism, which is about joyfully living with less, or as I say, joyfully living within the planet's boundaries. You know, this is a fixed system, and we can't just keep, you know, eternal growth is a complete myth. And I think that what we need to do is work out how to have a joyful life working with what we actually have, and we can do that. The 9th one is change. And I think there's nothing truer than nothing permanent except change. So why don't we anticipate, embrace and accommodate that change, and sort of know that it's coming and know that it will happen, and design around that and celebrate it, enjoy it. And finally, discovery and delight. You know, we need to engender curiosity and uplift our spirits, and we need to generously share what we've learned, because that's kind of a gift that we can give, and that when we stand on people's shoulders, we should be prepared for others to stand on ours and let more good things happen. So I think Patrick was saying, have you got some examples of regeneration? And I think that this one is, this is quite a fabulous one. This is in Yellowstone National Park, and the foxes were kept out of the, were hunted to extinction, and the whole park really disintegrated. And when they put them back in, when they grew them back in, the whole ecosystem responded in really amazing ways, because suddenly, sorry, it was the wolves that were put back in. Suddenly, the mooses, which were damaging the water edges on the streams, were kept away from them, and so the rivers were much healthier, and they weren't there all the time. So that allowed the streams to grow, and the trees around the streams to grow. So then there were more fish, and then the beavers returned, and then the birds returned, and a whole lot of the whole ecosystem. And it took about 10 or 15 years to actually completely, for that ecosystem, by the reintroduction of what was deemed a pest, to actually really regenerate and become much healthier. And I think that's just a real lesson on how we, if you think you're solving a problem, problems are dangerous because you isolate one part of a very complex system and look at it and think you're fixing it, and you can actually really damage the whole system in dealing with it in a silly way. And then this is a project, there's a group called regenesisgroup.com, and if you go to their website, they've got a heap of case studies of amazing projects that they have been working on in a really regenerative way. And this one was really interesting because the people who bought it wanted to do this super green development, a really big eco resort. And the site lay on a beachfront, and basically it had been really, the government had been, I think a lot of wetlands are deemed terrible areas, and that it was filled in and it was not healthy and it wasn't great. And through Regenesis' discovery of really looking at the place and understanding what that system was about, they found out that the reason people were coming here was because of the sea, all of the sea around it and all the stuff that came with it, and that these wetlands were absolutely critical to the success of that. And indeed, so were the people there. So that the aim of the project then became not the world's greenest resort, but the health of the ecosystem. And everything they did was around making it more healthy. And that included helping the local Indigenous people to survive and thrive, so that they too could help build that ecosystem and create the food and all sorts of things that became really important for the people coming. So became less of the building and much more about the system and understanding how it works, and understanding that if you make that healthy, then that is the most important thing about an eco-tourist resort in this instance. So I think that, as we go in these terrible times, we really do need to take time to listen, hear and think. We need to find joy with less and savor small moments. We need to flow like water and integrate the unexpected and enjoy and share our experiences. And as a great woman, Mary McKillop, said, we can't do everything, we can't do nothing, but we can do something. So on that note, I will say stop sharing my thing.
Thank you, Caroline.
Pleasure.
Thank you. That is such a wonderful, inspiring talk. Of course, we've got the joy of recording this for everyone, and versus being in a class with a sort of question and answer. And there's a bit of regret in my heart for that, I have to say, because I would like to hear some questions from students. So I'll try and just put a couple of thoughts out, but I also don't want to keep your time. Thank you for including the villages of Loreto Bay and shifting that residential scale up to that larger 6,000 acre scale. I think that's really interesting, and that focus on shifting the bias into the health of the ecosystem off the economies. Certainly the site that students are focused on and have been focused on for over 20 weeks is the very speculative large scale, extra large scale White Bay's site. And Mike Baird, I think, called it a wasteland in about 2014, I noticed in a report. So it's quite interesting hearing the shift and the languaging from you of moving from a more male biased perspective to potentially a more feminine biased one. So just as a question, at this larger urban scale, where there's obviously a great ongoing contest for a magnificent site that I would never call a wasteland, and when I visited there, I find it extraordinarily vast, expansive, beautiful, eerie. It has an amazing outlook to the rest of the harbour, next to the compression of Balmain and many of the other suburbs. And just a little part of me wonders if the whole thing could just, was reading your article, consider embodied carbon 0.5 in an article I'll share with anyone. And in short, ideas to consider in order of impact include don't build. And I thought, that would be nice. So there's a part of me that goes, could the whole thing just be a bird paradise? And then the other half of me goes, of course it can't be. Of course it can't be. The world's more complex. The needs are bigger. Cities' needs are bigger as machines. So, what's my question? As that scale of site with that level of politics on it, do you think anything coming towards the idea of don't build? Do you think that hold any power?
Well, I think you mentioned earlier the importance of courage. And I think at the moment, here we are at a portal. We're going through this amazing time, the world shutting down. COVID has kind of arrested so much and changed so much. And what is COVID is, I believe COVID is another sign amongst the many we are witnessing at the moment about climate change, because what has happened is we have so pressured so many places that these species have jumped, and these sort of diseases have jumped and kind of gone from where they were safe in jungles, and now they're not, and now they're coming into the human race. So I think that if there was ever a time to be thinking radically different about how we do things, now is it, because we are in a radically different place. And I think that we cannot be what we cannot see. And I think part of the job of architects and landscape architects and other people is to imagine and create a beautiful, gorgeous future that we need. So the idea of what could this place be, the idea of perhaps not building, but mending the current buildings, of imagining what does a post-COVID city of Sydney really need? I mean, maybe we could really think through some really sort of a rewilding of that place to be a place where people can go, they can kayak there, they can cycle there, they can walk there, they can explore a beauty that enables them to have healthy, productive lives in the more, because there's so much density around. There's going to be more density down that train line. I mean, there's so much density around that why can't we just say, actually, let's really imagine what this might be. I mean, you could even, and this is the job of the students, is to go there and think, what is it that this place, that this part of the city, that this city needs most? And I bet it's not more development, particularly as there's going to be a heap of it down at, just down at the fish markets. Perhaps we need some space, some lungs, some gorgeous, regenerative, beautiful place. And maybe think about what that big building can be used for. And it could be a hub of creative. I mean, it was a powerhouse. What does a 21st century powerhouse look like? What might it be powering? How might it be a place to power people? I don't know. But I just definitely think that it's, at this time, stop being constrained by thinking from an economic system that is not serving the planet well, and start thinking about how the work that we can do doesn't just have economics driving it, but has the health of the planet, the health of the people, the health of the place as its main driver, because that actually is the smartest economic decision you can make.
Terrific. A wonderful provocative answer. I think I'll only ask you one more question, because I feel I could talk to you for about an hour actually about it. About 70 students in the group, half of them in China, and many of the other ones in Australia. English is a second language. And beyond all that, with 5K radiuses going with us all within lockdown, many people can't get to the site. Many people have been to the site. Many haven't. And I was triggered by something you mentioned there in your essence and country and energy and resources and economy, this idea of share the learnings. Yeah. So I very much want to acknowledge this inability for many people to get to the site, to back up an idea. And I really acknowledge that that's an important part of the way I work. So I feel quite handcuffed or tied in that way. Have you got any advice about not being able to visit a site, particularly of such scale, when there's lots of information available and the entire group have it and have spent 2 terms on it? There's maps and there's bathymetry maps and there's planning documents, et cetera, et cetera. But when you go to the site, it's wonderful, and it's amazing how that wonder doesn't come through any of the documentation. So the question is, in this predicament of being out of sight, have you got any advice for stepping forward in design?
Well, wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if all of those who have been to site could even just record their own description about what that is, either whichever way they can do that most, they feel most comfortable, whether it's speaking to it, whether it's drawing it, whether it's just writing or putting a collage together. But I just think that sharing of information about, and not what it looks like, but what it feels like, and what were and identifying some really unusual things that you found there that you didn't even know about or think about till you actually went there. And to share that would be wonderful. And I think the other place to go to share is to sort of look at historical, sort of how that site has evolved over history, and try and get a collation of maps. And I think if you've got 70 students and everyone can kind of put together and do their part, so that maybe those who haven't been to site could do the research and try and find those historical maps and that sort of evolution. And even if there were, wouldn't it be great if there were maps of the site before it got really developed, so you could understand where it really came from. But I just think that as we go forward, sharing has got to become a much bigger part of how we work together, because I think that there is a generosity and beauty to that. And particularly when we, as you say, when people can't visit, that gift is a really beautiful thing to do.
Thank you, Caroline. Terrific speaking with you. Just another congratulations for your 2021 Leadership and Sustainability Awards. It sounds justly deserved. I'll let you go, and thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure, Patrick. Thanks so much.
Okay.